She had been waiting for this day her whole life, sitting quietly in the audience with her hands folded tight, eyes searching for her son's name on the program. But before the first speech could even finish, 2 security guards walked up to her row. Their voices were sharp, almost rehearsed. "Ma'am, you can't sit here. You need to leave." Heads turned, whispers spread like wildfire. The woman clutched her small purse, confusion painted on her face. "Why, my son is graduating today." "That's his name right there," she said, pointing at the stage banner with trembling fingers. The guards didn't care. "This section is for families with tickets. You don't belong here," one of them sneered, as if her plain dress and worn shoes were enough proof she wasn't worthy. Her cheeks burned, but she refused to stand. "I raised him alone. I worked 2 jobs just to get him here. I will not leave." The entire auditorium grew restless. Some looked away, pretending not to notice. Others shook their heads in pity. The guards leaned closer, their voices low but full of threat. "Either you walk out on your own or we'll drag you out." A silence swept the hall, heavy and cruel. The woman's lips trembled, but before she could reply, a sudden movement at the back caught everyone's eye. 6 men in uniform walked in together. Broad shoulders, straight posture, their presence commanding the room. Their boots echoed against the polished floor. The guards froze mid-sentence, their arrogance cracking for the first time. One of the men stepped forward, his voice calm but filled with steel. "Is there a problem here?" The woman's eyes widened. She knew that voice. And in that moment, the crowd realized this wasn't just a simple mother sitting alone. Something far bigger was about to unfold. The guard cleared his throat, trying to recover his authority. "This woman doesn't have a ticket for this section. Rules are rules. She needs to leave." His voice cracked slightly, but he forced a smirk, hoping the uniforms in front of him wouldn't notice. The man in front, the one whose eyes seemed carved out of iron, took a slow step forward. The hall had gone silent now. Hundreds of families watching like they were witnessing a scene pulled out of a movie. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't need to. "This woman," he said, pointing gently toward her, "is the mother of one of ours. You want to throw her out? You'll have to go through us first." Gasps broke out in the audience. The guards faltered, exchanging nervous glances. "Of yours? What do you mean?" one stammered. Another man from the group of 6 pulled a folded paper from his pocket and handed it over. It wasn't just a piece of paper. It was military identification, the kind that made even trained officers hesitate. The guard took one look and his face turned pale. The mother's eyes filled with tears. She hadn't seen these men in years, but she recognized them now. Her son had spoken about them every night on the phone. His brothers, the ones who had trained with him, bled with him, carried him through missions no civilian would ever know about. The tallest of the 6 leaned down and whispered to her so only she could hear. "Ma'am, your son is not just graduating. He's receiving the highest honor today, and you're sitting right where you belong." The guards tried to back away quietly, but the first man raised his hand. "Not so fast. You embarrassed her in front of this entire hall. You don't walk away without an apology." The crowd leaned forward, holding their breath. The woman sat frozen between shame and pride, the entire graduation turning into something no one would ever forget. And just as the guards opened their mouths, a new voice thundered from the stage. The microphone squealed for a moment, and then the principal's voice boomed through the speakers. But it wasn't his usual warm tone. It carried sharpness, anger even. "What's going on down there?" All eyes turned toward the stage where the school staff stood frozen, staring at the confrontation in disbelief. Before the guards could answer, one of the SEALs stepped forward, his voice carrying across the hall without need for a mic. "These men tried to humiliate a mother. They told her she didn't belong at her own son's graduation." His words cut through the silence, and the murmur of outrage spread through the audience like fire through dry grass. The principal's jaw tightened. He knew the boy they were all waiting to honor. He knew his record, his achievements, his sacrifices. But more than that, he knew the mother's story. Her son had turned down scholarships just to serve, had endured training that broke most men, and now he was about to receive recognition that only a few ever earned. And this was how his mother was treated. The woman's son wasn't on the stage yet, but from behind the curtain he had heard everything. His fists clenched as he peeked out, seeing his mother cornered and shamed. He wanted to rush out, but the SEAL standing closest to him held up a hand. "Wait, not yet." The guards shifted uncomfortably, trying to laugh it off. "We were just following orders." Someone reported she didn't look like she belonged. The words slipped out before they realized how cruel they sounded. Gasps filled the room again. The woman's shoulders stiffened. For years she had swallowed humiliation, at jobs where people ignored her and neighborhoods where she was treated as less. But this was different. This was her son's day. She looked up at the guards, her voice trembling but steady. And who decides who belongs, you? The SEALs didn't move, but their silence was more threatening than shouting ever could be. The principal took a step toward the mic, ready to address the entire hall. Then let it be clear, he said, his voice cutting through the tension. This woman belongs more than anyone else here. Because without her sacrifice, we wouldn't be honoring the man who's about to step on this stage. The hall erupted into cheers, and the guards looked like they wanted to disappear into the floor. But before the noise could settle, a figure in a decorated uniform emerged from the side of the stage, and the atmosphere shifted completely. The audience erupted into clapping as the figure stepped into the light. His chest carried rows of medals that shimmered under the stage lights, and his presence alone silenced the chaos. He wasn't just any officer, he was a commander, the kind who could walk into a battlefield and make hardened soldiers stand straighter. The principal quickly stepped aside, giving him the mic without a word. The commander's gaze swept across the hall, pausing on the guards who still stood stiff with fear. Then his eyes softened when they landed on the woman, sitting quietly clutching the strap of her old purse. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice deep and steady. "Before we celebrate the graduates, we need to address what just happened here." The crowd leaned in, sensing the weight of his words. "That woman you tried to push out? She's not just a guest. She's the mother of one of our finest, a son who went through hell to stand where he is today, a son who survived training most men can't endure. And you thought she didn't belong?" His voice rose with each word, shaking the walls. The guards tried to stammer an excuse, but he didn't let them. He motioned toward the SEALs, who flanked the woman like a wall of steel. "Do you see these men? They're not just here for ceremony. They're here because that graduate, her son, earned his place among them. He stood shoulder to shoulder with them, and today they stand for her." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The mother's lips trembled, tears threatening to fall as she realized what was unfolding. The commander turned back toward the curtain and raised his hand. "Bring him out." The audience held their breath. The music started low, a steady drum roll that made every heartbeat race, and then the curtain drew back, revealing a young man in full dress uniform, his posture sharp, his eyes locked on one person only, his mother. The hall erupted into thunderous applause, but he didn't look at the crowd. He walked straight toward her, step after step, until he stood right in front of her seat. Then, without hesitation, he took off his cap, handed it to her, and whispered, "Mom, this is your victory too." The SEALs snapped to attention, saluting both mother and son. And just when it seemed like the moment couldn't get any more powerful, the commander leaned toward the mic and said something that made the guards' faces drain of all color. The commander's words hit like a hammer. These guards didn't just insult a mother, they disrespected a Navy SEAL's family. And in our code, that's not something we ignore. The audience went silent again, their clapping fading into an electric tension. The guards froze, their eyes darting from the commander to the young graduate, now standing tall beside his mother. One of them tried to mutter, "We didn't know." But the commander cut him off with a raised hand. "That's the problem. You judged her by what she wore, by where she sat, by how she looked, but you never asked who she was. And today, the whole country will know what you tried to do." Phones shot up instantly, dozens of parents, students, and guests recording every second. This wasn't just a graduation anymore. It was history being made. The graduate placed a steady hand on his mother's shoulder, his voice calm but sharp enough for the microphones to catch. "I fought for freedom overseas. I never thought my mother would need warriors to protect her here at home." The crowd roared, standing to their feet. Some clapped, some shouted, others wiped their eyes. The guards looked like they were about to sink into the floor, but the commander wasn't finished. He turned toward the principal. "I recommend these men be escorted out immediately. This day belongs to her and her son, not to anyone who tried to humiliate them. Security staff, real one." Security staff, real ones, not the two imposters in cheap uniforms, appeared at the doors. The guards were grabbed by the arms, dragged toward the exit as the audience booed. One of them tried to resist, shouting, "This isn't fair!" But the crowd drowned him out with thunderous cheers. The mother, still clutching the cap her son had placed in her hands, looked up at him with tear-filled eyes. He bent down, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "You'll never sit alone again." The SEALs closed ranks around them, forming a circle of honor as the commander raised his hand for silence. "And now," he said, his voice steady but burning with pride, "let's give this graduate the honor he deserves." But just as the applause rose again, someone unexpected stepped onto the stage. Someone who would twist the entire ceremony into a moment no one saw coming. The applause froze mid-clap as the unexpected figure walked across the stage. It wasn't another officer. It wasn't a teacher. It was a man in a sharp suit, holding a folder thick with documents. His polished shoes clicked against the wooden stage as he approached the microphone with a smug smile that didn't match the emotional moment at all. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice smooth, too smooth. "Before this show continues, there's something important that needs to be clarified." His words sliced through the pride-filled atmosphere, making everyone frown. The SEALs shifted instantly, their eyes narrowing as if they smelled danger. The mother looked confused. Her son stiffened, his jaw tightening. He knew that voice. The man adjusted his tie, flipping open the folder. "According to the paperwork here, this woman is not listed as an authorized family member on the official guest list. In fact," he paused, letting the moment hang, "she isn't even supposed to be here today." Gasps tore through the crowd. The mother's face went pale, her hands gripping the cap so tightly it shook. The guards who had been dragged out earlier peeked through the doors, smirking at their vindication. The man in the suit continued, his tone smug. "Rules are rules. The school board approved this list, and if we don't follow it, then we're just inviting chaos. I'm afraid she'll have to be removed." The commander's hand slammed the podium so hard the mic screeched. "Enough!" His voice thundered through the hall, shaking the man's arrogance. But the man in the suit didn't back down. "I'm simply stating the facts, Commander. Paperwork doesn't lie." He held up the folder like a weapon, as if ink on a page could erase a lifetime of sacrifice. The graduate's fists clenched, his voice shaking with controlled rage. "That paperwork doesn't tell you who raised me. It doesn't tell you who stayed up every night waiting for a call that I was still alive. It doesn't tell you who worked herself to the bone so I could stand here." The crowd erupted into cheers, but the man in the suit smirked again, holding the folder higher. "Touching speech, son. But without proper documentation, none of this matters." The mother lowered her head, her eyes burning with humiliation. But then slowly she reached into her purse, the same worn purse the guards had mocked earlier, and pulled out an envelope. Her hand shook as she stood up, holding it high. "Then maybe this will matter." The SEALs exchanged looks, their eyes widening while the commander gave a slow nod. Whatever was in that envelope, it was about to change everything. The hall went silent as the woman's trembling hands tore open the envelope. She pulled out a set of papers, yellowed at the edges, but stamped with seals that carried undeniable weight. Her voice cracked, but she forced herself to read aloud. "This is the original guardianship document, signed by the court. My husband died when my son was 6. I raised him alone, and every single record proves I am his legal and only parent." She held the papers high and the camera zoomed in. Parents, students, reporters in the back row, all capturing every word. Gasps rippled through the audience. The SEALs stood taller, pride in their eyes, while the commander gave a satisfied nod. The man in the suit's smug expression faltered. He reached for the papers, desperate to snatch them away, but the graduate stepped in front of his mother, chest squared, eyes blazing. "Touch those papers," he growled, "and I'll personally make sure you never step foot in another military ceremony again." The crowd exploded in cheers. The commander leaned into the mic, his voice sharp as a blade. "You said paperwork doesn't lie. And you're right. This paperwork tells the truth you tried to bury." He turned toward the audience. "This woman isn't just authorized, she's the reason this graduate even exists. Without her sacrifice, none of us would be standing here today." The man in the suit's face flushed red. This doesn't change the board's approval," he shouted desperately, waving his folder like a shield. But before he could finish, one of the SEALs stepped forward, pulling out his phone. "Funny thing," he said calmly. "We have the entire exchange recorded. Your attempt to remove her, your lies about the list, all of it. And guess what? It's already being uploaded live." The man froze. Murmurs filled the hall. People checking their phones, gasping as the live stream popped up with thousands of viewers already tuning in. The guards at the back paled even further. their humiliation now public. The mother's eyes filled with tears, but this time they weren't from shame. They were from pride. Her son placed the cap back in her hands, closing her fingers around it. "Mom," he whispered, his voice breaking. "They can't erase what you've done for me." And now the world knows it too. The commander's gaze swept the hall. Justice isn't paperwork. Justice is truth. And today, truth belongs to her. The man in the suit tried to back away, but the real security blocked the exits. The audience was on its feet again, roaring with applause. And just as the chaos reached its peak, the principal raised a hand and announced something that stunned everyone into silence. The principal stepped back up to the microphone, his face flushed with a mix of anger and determination. He raised both hands to silence the crowd, his voice steady but burning with authority. "Enough games. This graduation is about honoring our students, not humiliating families. And today, one family stands above every rule and every list because sacrifice cannot be measured by paper." The audience roared in agreement, but he wasn't finished. His eyes locked on the man in the suit, who was now sweating under the bright lights. "Sir, you've embarrassed this institution, disrupted this ceremony, and disrespected a mother who gave everything. Effective immediately. You are banned from this school and all its events." The crowd gasped, then burst into applause so loud it shook the rafters. The man's smugness crumbled, his face drained of color. You can't do this," he stammered. But the commander stepped forward, towering over him. "Oh, he can. And if you try to resist, you'll be leaving in handcuffs." The SEALs closed in, their silent presence enough to push the man back toward the exit. Phones captured every moment. The internet was already on fire, hashtags flooding in real time. Meanwhile, the graduate turned back to his mother, his eyes shining. He placed his cap back on his head, then slowly removed one of his military pins from his chest. With careful hands, he pinned it to her dress. "Mom, you carried me this far. This belongs to you more than it ever did to me." The crowd leapt to its feet again, cheering, crying, saluting. Strangers wiped their eyes. Veterans in the back rows stood at attention. The mother's hands shook as she touched the pin, whispering through her tears, "I never wanted honor. I only wanted you safe." Her son smiled softly. "And because of you, I was." The principal raised his hand toward the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, this isn't just a graduation anymore. This is a reminder that true honor doesn't come from titles or lists. It comes from sacrifice." The audience's roar nearly drowned his words, but then the commander leaned into the mic again, his eyes sharp. "But before this day ends, there's one more truth you all deserve to hear." The room froze, every heart pounding, knowing another twist was about to unfold. The commander's voice dropped low, heavy with something the crowd could feel in their bones. "This graduate is not just any soldier. He wasn't just trained by us. He saved us." The hall went still. Even the cameras stopped moving, lenses locked on his face. The mother looked up sharply, confusion flickering in her eyes. Her son stood frozen, jaw tight as if he already knew what was coming. The commander continued, his words slow and deliberate. 2 years ago, in a mission we can't disclose, we were pinned down, outnumbered, outgunned. We were as good as dead. And it was him, your graduate, who carried 3 of us out under fire. He refused evacuation until every man was safe. We stand here because he chose to risk his life." Gasps rippled through the audience, followed by stunned silence. The SEALs behind him shifted, their eyes hard but wet with unspoken pride. One of them spoke, breaking the silence. "He's not just our brother. He's the reason we're alive." The mother's trembling hands covered her mouth. Tears spilled freely now, not from shame but from the weight of truth she had never known. She looked at her son, whispering, "You never told me." Her son bowed his head. "Because you already worried enough, Mom. I didn't want you to know how close it was." The crowd erupted into chants, his name echoing through the hall, rolling like thunder. The principal's eyes glistened as he turned to the mother. "Ma'am, today your son doesn't just graduate. Today he will be honored before this entire nation."